Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike, and I'm the programs director for Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's virtual training session. Today, we're going to be joined by Talbot Brooks, who's an expert in GIS information systems, and he's going to be talking about some geospatial intelligence for first responders. Should be a very interesting topic I know I'm looking forward to. Before we get started with today's training, I'm going to pass things over to Craig Duck, who's one of our volunteers with Africa Fire Mission. He's going to share a few words of encouragement with you all.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Really appreciate you coming to this, and appreciate AFM for hosting this. I just wanted to give us some words of encouragement today. I know many of you are well versed on what's going on in Kenya. I was looking at some of where you all from, Saudi Arabia and Zimbabwe and a whole bunch of other places. Hopefully Malawi. I didn't know if I saw that, but anyways. I know you're very familiar with the civil unrest that's going on in Kenya, and firefighters and first responders were always on the scene when things like that happen, trying to restore the situation, bring calm to it, pick up the pieces, as it were. So I know the Kenya EMTs have been doing a great job with that. There's been people that have been injured and killed, and so it's a troubling time for firefighters because of the large scale thing. And I wanted to figure out what does the Bible say about that. And I'm reminded in John chapter 16 verse 33 that Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." And I know we can lose heart in situations like that. Jesus is reminding us that things are not always going to be easy in this world, and we're going to have trouble, we're going to have trials, we're going to have tribulations, and you all, as firefighters and first responders, know that. But he backs that up by saying, "Hey, be of good cheer, be of good heart. I have overcome the world." And so that I know as I was in the fire service in Washington, D.C., we had many challenging times. And if it wasn't for my faith, I don't know what I would have done. And so I just wanted to encourage you with that. And I just wanted to take a moment and pray for our brothers and sisters in Kenya, in the fire service, the EMT service, and all those that are walking through that. So let's go to God in prayer. Our great Heavenly Father, again, we thank you that you are in control. Father, we just pray that during difficult times that you would show yourself mighty. Lord, we pray for safety for those that are involved in this uprising. We just pray that you would keep them safe, the firefighters and first responders, that you would allow them to do their work, that they wouldn't be in the crossfire. But again, Lord, that you would just glorify yourselves. Father, I thank you for those that are serving over there. I just pray that you would help them as they go through these difficult times to be able to process it and be able to continue the work, even though the negative things that they have seen. And I think of Jose, as he's not here today because of that. We just pray for him and some of the other EMTs that normally are here, that you would be with each one of them. We give you all the honor and glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
All righty. Thank you very much, Craig. Appreciate you joining us and sharing those words of encouragement this morning. Before we get started with today's training, just a couple of administrative items to go over with you all. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you will receive a certificate of attendance for today's training. If you experience some internet issues or you can't make it through all of today's training, just know that we do record these sessions. You can find a recording on our YouTube channel if you search for Africa Fire Mission, or if you keep an eye in the chat, I'll place a link where you can find a Google Drive folder where we have our trainings from this week and the other weeks that we've done so far previously this year. You can also access that information from our website at www.africafiremission.org. And you can find on the resources page all of our different training resources that are available to the firefighters out there. At this point in time, I'm going to pass things over to our instructor of the day, Mr. Talbot Brooks. Take it away, sir.
Hey, my name is Talbot Brooks, and I am a 37-year veteran of the fire service. And I usually am much better organized and together than I have been this morning. My sincere apologies. I had some problems with my home computer this morning and had to make a mad dash for the office. And so now I'm joining you from where I professionally work, which is as a professor of geospatial intelligence at Delta State University. But that's not my true love. I started with the fire service in 1987 and have done everything you can imagine, from working in a big city department outside of Boston to rural firefighting, where I am now. Been at fire departments with millions and millions and millions of dollars to spend, and at my current department where we don't have two nickels to rub together. So kind of covered the full gamut and done the EMS thing and hazardous materials and all of that. However, I think the most significant event in my career occurred in 2005. I had just moved here to Cleveland, Mississippi, and it's a paint picture of Cleveland. It is a town of about 14,000. It is located 2 hours from the nearest city of any size. If I want to go to the movie theater, I have to drive 2 hours. If I want to go to an airport, I have to drive at least 2 hours. It's a big farm community, and the only other thing keeping things alive is Delta State University. And so when I first moved here in 2005, I joined the local fire department and got involved. And what would become a prelude to a much larger problem, I asked the chief. I said, "Chief, how do I find my way as a volunteer to where the fires are?" And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Well, you look at where the water spills out of the tanker truck when it goes around the corner." And sure enough, that worked just fine until the first rainy day that we had a fire. And so understanding the location of incidents, I should have realized at the moment, was a terrible problem, because not long after, through a bit of a convoluted story, I found myself at the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency as the person in charge of technology and geospatial services in support of what would become the most destructive tropical cyclone to ever strike the U.S. And all of the communication systems on the coast, 400 miles south where we were, failed. And I was getting emergency calls that would roll over into the state emergency operations office. And there would be things like, "My baby has a hole in her neck. I'm on a roof. I can see a water tower, but I think I'm in Biloxi still. Can you send help?" And my answer was no. I can't, because we can't put a helicopter in the air and have them kind of fly and stop and read house numbers. And oh, by the way, the house numbers that people would use are underwater, and everybody else is up on their roof as a consequence of this tropical cyclone. And so the challenge became, how do we communicate location during a time of crisis or disaster? And who's ready for that? Now, I'm going to try to play a video here that I recorded with National Public Radio that will put this kind of in perspective. And I'm hoping that it will play here. Let's see.
Support for NPR and the following
is that hearable? Can you hear it?
Yes.
Project at AtriCure, a healthcare company creating technologies that help treat atrial fibrillation. Click the play button to hear her conversation with Brian Denver
hold on just a second.
and learn how SAP Concur solutions give AtriCure employees more time to get back to their community.
Would you tell a stranger right now exactly where you are? What if your life or somebody's life depends on the directions you give? When Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, search and rescue teams discovered that they lacked a common language for explaining where they were or where they needed help. There are mapping systems that make rescue and response easier if Americans are willing to use it. And here's Dan Charles. One morning, about 2.5 years ago, Tom Terry parked his car in this empty 5-acre parking lot in Arlington, Virginia, just across from Washington, D.C. He got out and then heard a crash.
Turned and looked, saw a motorcycle banging along the guardrail on the side, right up there, about 100 yards away. Of course, we pulled out the cell phone, called 911.
When the 911 operator came on the line, Tom Terry had to answer that basic universal question: where? You'd think he'd be good at that. After all, he's the executive director of the.
And I'm showing on screen where Tom was located.
It's a high-quality map, but Tom Terry struggled.
Well, it said something like this. It's on a freeway coming out of Washington, D.C. It's adjacent to the Pentagon. It's adjacent to Columbia Pike. It's opposite side of the freeway from the Pentagon City Shopping Mall. And after a moment, she comes back and says, "Are you on Interstate 66?
But Interstate 66 is several miles from here. Terry was frustrated, but then he remembered he had a global positioning system receiver in his pocket.
So I said, "Well, ma'am, can you take a coordinate from a GPS receiver?" And she goes, "No, I can't use that."
So the operator had to wait for somebody else to call, somebody who could name the road where the crash happened. But imagine how much harder it would have been to get help to that motorcycle if all the street signs had been blown down. And if the rescue crew was coming from out of state, what if the rescuers were in a helicopter that had never seen the area before? That was the situation for thousands of people stranded and ailing along the Gulf Coast after Katrina. The Coast Guard would come running into the room and say, "Okay, we have a baby with a hole in her neck. They're at this location. Give us the coordinates. We got to go." Talbot Brooks is director of a Center for Geospatial Information Technology at Delta State University, Mississippi. He was volunteering at a command center in Jackson after Katrina ripped through that city. But you still can't fly a helicopter to a street address. They don't kind of stop the hover and look at street signs. Instead, they need some type of coordinate to fly to. In this case, we were providing them with latitude and longitude. Brooks became a kind of geographic translator during the crisis. If someone needed to get to Memorial Hospital in Gulfport, he'd start with the hospital's street address, 4500 13th Street. Then he'd check computer databases to locate the coordinates that the helicopter pilots needed. Gulfport's Memorial Hospital is at 30 degrees, 22 minutes, 3 seconds north, 89 degrees, 6 minutes, 53 seconds west. Then other military units showed up with yet another geographic language, the Military Grid Reference System. Memorial Hospital, according to that grid, is located at the coordinates 16R CU 9673, 6136. Some civilian parts of the federal government now have adopted the military system for identifying the location of buildings and streets. They now call it the National Grid. Brooks says the National Grid is much easier to use than longitude and latitude. For one thing, the coordinates measure actual distances on the ground. Eventually, Brooks says, emergency workers in the path of Katrina used these coordinates to find their way around, and he became a National Grid convert. I'm sold hook, line, and sinker. It works to put everybody on the same page now. We're this, and I hope that God doesn't happen again, I would have the national grid up and running the first time out of the chute, but you'll have trouble finding a map of the gas station with national grid coordinates marked on. Every one of those maps does have a grid, the letters and numbers that the map companies print along the edge of each page to help you locate obscure streets. But each map uses a different system. Tom Terry from the Public FY Mapping Project says that's got to change. Every commercial map should also show the coordinates of the national grid.
You wouldn't go buy maps and expect to have 35 different street names on them. Well, it's the same thing. If you have the same grid on all the maps, it turns out that's a very powerful capability. It's when it's consistent, it's the same one. It's a language of location. Learning.
And so I'm going to stop that there and show you some aerial photography from Hurricane Katrina. It should be on the monitor here. And what you're looking at is you see this brown trail. That is where all the debris rested in piles up to 10 meters tall. And everything between it and the coast, for a distance of about 200 kilometers in Mississippi, had been scrubbed clean. It had been wiped flat. And so I realized all of a sudden how we normally describe location wouldn't work anymore. And that kind of became a pivotal moment in my career. And I want to stop this for a moment and just ask the audience, do you have incidents, fires or disasters, or everyday calls at which it's difficult to determine the location that you have to respond to? Gary, are they okay to unmute?
Yep, they can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, this is Mustafa.
Hi, Mustafa.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the question that you raised on, do we find difficulties in locating places where there is a fire or something? Yes, obviously, yes, we usually meet some such circumstances, more especially in newly developed areas, or we have areas like in Lilongwe City where we call them informal settlement areas, where we do not actually, the councils do not actually have the actual maps of places. And people, the development out there has been formed in a form of what we call squatters.
Yes.
So you don't actually have to know the actual location until you tell the caller to send some person at a landmark place to welcome you so that they can give you the exact location where the fire is. So the issue of failing to find locations is very common even here in Lilongwe.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I've spent another hat that I wear. I work for the United Nations Platform for Space-Based Emergency and Disaster Response. And I am in Africa at least once or twice every year, and I'm very familiar with these informal settlements. And indeed, there is no such thing as a street address there. And as I think we've all experienced as emergency responders, the longer it takes for us to get to the scene of the emergency, the worse the emergency becomes, right? The worse the potential outcome because we're needed to intervene with our skills. That's a very obvious example of what is a very fundamental problem. How does a caller identify where they're located at? And then how does our emergency communication system relay that information to us as emergency responders such that we can find the emergency? So coming out of Hurricane Katrina, one of the things that we worked with the U.S. Fire Administration and FEMA and Homeland Security and anybody who would listen to do was to create a common coordinate system for locating emergencies. What we discovered is pulling a GPS out of your pocket, even if you can describe latitude and longitude, it's very difficult for users to put that to use. And so we did something that the military discovered 50 years ago, that there's a coordinate system. We call it the U.S. National Grid, but it's the same as the military grid reference system. And what it does is allows us to append the location field with the same types of coordinates that they use and adopt the same type of GPS that they use, because all of that is free and open source. And I'm going to show you the power of that in twofold. Before I do, I think the next part of what I wanted to talk to you about was that, at least for me here in rural Mississippi, we don't have a lot of fire codes. People just built where they built. We have informal settlements here, believe it or not, that are not at all different from what I've seen and encountered in South Africa. And when we show up, the objective isn't to save the residents, it's to save the neighborhood, because things have just been built on top of each other over and over and over again. And limited water supply, stolen electricity from the grid, you got to make sure you don't electrocute yourself. All of these types of issues. We can't change that, right? But what we do need to change is how we fight fire. And I would propose to you that the most effective thing that we can do as fire departments now is to start fighting fire with data. We're going to have all the nozzles with hoses. We can have the best turnouts in the world, fast fire trucks, and I have access to those things here. But my rate of death by fire here in Bolivar County, Mississippi, is about 137 per 100,000. That puts us on par with the rate of death by fire in Bolivia. In the United States, think about that for a minute now. My rate of death by fire is, on a global list, 89th in place. I've gone almost my entire career and seen only a couple of fire deaths. And the problem is the lack of codes, but also the lack of where are we going and information about location. So we created this national grid system, and we've also mandated the collection of data about every incident that we respond to. And so I have on screen what I'm going to do is take these data from an Excel spreadsheet, and all this Excel spreadsheet is, and it can be Google Sheets, it can be whatever you want it to be. The important thing is that you start collecting data about every incident that you have. So I have the date and the location and a regular address. We code for the type of incident, the number of people involved, number of fire trucks we sent, all of this type of stuff, and the location. And how that becomes important is I can open this location field in GIS software that is able to take it and encode it. I can cancel this and turn it into a map. So it's a process called geocoding. And I'm going to use the World Geocoding Service. This is free and available to anybody and everybody who wants to use it. And I'll come back at a later date and engage those who want hands-on workshops with these types of data, working with it, and conduct them at a much more detailed, much slower rate than what I'm doing now. Hang on just a minute. Go. So what you'll see is I'm going to take all of those data. These are all the fire calls for Wilson, North Carolina for 1 year. And you can see that they have now appeared on my map. Now, by themselves, that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of context. But what I can do is add a base map. And now I can see the location of all of those calls. Is everybody able to see that screen? A nod,
Yes.
hello, yes? Great. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to add another piece of data, which is the location of our fire stations. I'm going to add that to the map. And I'm going to change that symbol. We're going to make it a big red square. So you should be able to see them right there. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay. And those are all of our fire calls. Now, by themselves, the question I want to ask is, are my fire stations in the right place? And this begins the topic, or begins addressing what we call the standard of cover. And remember, I started this by saying that the response time, the distance that we travel to an emergency, the longer it takes, the less likely we are to have a positive outcome, right? Now, I realize your fire stations are where they are, but understanding where they are in relation to the data for your calls is very important, right? The second part of this, at least for us, is understanding what the potential risk is. So these calls start giving us an idea of where the risk is. Prior incidents predict future performance. Now, I'm going to add another layer of data to this GIS that we went out and collected, and it's the fire hydrants. Give me just a second to load the hydrants. And they're there. And now it just looks like a bunch of dots on screen. I'm going to turn off my calls, and I'm going to take my hydrant data now, and I'm going to make this make instant sense to you. Here in the US, at least, our water sources will go out and measure how much water comes out of a hydrant. And I can do that very simply and automated here in the GIS software. Uh, uh, do it like that, and let's make sure we're looking at the right field. I'm going to manually color this. So low flow hydrants, I'm going to assign a color of red. Medium flow, I'll give it color of orange. Mid flow usually becomes green. And we usually only use 4 colors, but I'll use 5 here. Our best hydrants are blue. And our worst ones, I'll leave them this, very best ones, I'll leave this purple color. Okay, so now with just the fire hydrants on this map, I'm going to turn everything else off. I'm going to ask the audience who can tell me a story about my jurisdiction. Who can look at this data for available water and tell me a story? Tell me what it means. The red areas have the worst water flow. Orange is kind of in between, and blue is high water flow. And it's not just that you can do this with fire hydrants if you have a municipal water system. This can be drafting sources. What ponds or cisterns have a lot of water available, which ones don't, which ones need repair. It's a way of looking at available water to extinguish a fire. Can anybody tell me where the oldest part of town is?
I think I have a question.
Yes.
I can see some small dots there with different colors,
Yes.
but I don't see any key that determines the colors and what they translate.
Yeah. So the key's over at left, and red means that there's poor water flow.
Okay.
And green and blue mean that there's good water flow. So red and orange are bad, green and blue are good.
Okay. Unfortunately,
You're watching
the
on the
screen
phone?
looks very small. I don't know, maybe because I'm attending through a phone, but
Yeah.
the picture seems very small. I can see some blue colors. I can see some red ones. I can see big reds. I don't know the other ones are if they are brown or what.
Yeah. All right, let's see if I can make this a little better here. Give me just a second.
And again, if you go to the chat, someone is complaining about the quality of the sound. People are not able to get you correctly. I don't know if we can do something about it.
I think that issue might be on their side. It's coming through pretty clear for most of us.
Okay, all right.
Make these symbols a little
It's
bigger.
quite clear also on my side.
Maybe they have an issue with their network out there.
Most probably. And also, if you can't see the colors, you can still zoom and you'll be able to get something.
There we go. Is that a little better? So you're looking at my city, and I'll tell you what's going on. Is you can see this area here is red and orange. It's very concentrated. And then outside in what would be the outlying areas of my city, I start to see green and blue and magenta dots that show where I have a lot of water available. And there it is with the actual street map underneath it. And what the problem is here is this central area was built first, and it's the oldest. And because it was built first and it's the oldest, it has the smallest water mains. It has the least capable fire hydrants. But out in newer areas, there are better fire hydrants because the water system was built more recently, right? Now, as a fire chief, and this is where I'm going with this, how can you use this data? What should you do if you know your downtown area has the least reliable, the poorest quality of available water to fight a fire compared with your outlying newly developed areas? Anybody have some ideas?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi, Hussein, how are you?
I'm Emmanuel. Yes, I see I'm Emmanuel. I'm actually having problem with the audio. And secondly, there's the screen there. I see some red, blue line all around. I'm not understanding that they are not sending no indication. They are not indicating anything right now. I'm not understanding them. I'm seeing red dot, I'm seeing blue dot. Can you further explain the indication, please?
Okay, so let me explain that again. The dots represent.
I'm seeing the dot on the screen. I'm seeing them already. But can you further elaborate on the indication? What are those indications? I'm seeing blue, I'm seeing red. Can you further elaborate on the indication? What they indicate already?
Yes. Red dots mean that I have a bad fire hydrant.
You got my question?
The flow of water in a red fire hydrant.
Yes, I'm seeing the red dot.
Right? And orange dots down here where the cursor is. That's bad. I have low flow from these fire hydrants. Whereas out here, outside the urban core, downtown area, in newer built places, you see that I have blue and green dots representing the flow of water from a hydrant. And those are high water flow areas. If I'm looking at those,
yeah, Talbot, you got my question?
Yes. Did you get the answer?
Okay. Yeah, can you please elaborate, please?
Yes, this is, I'll make this even simpler. Hang on.
Okay. Talbot, you asking me a question? You asking me to respond to something?
No, I'm going to make this very simple.
Okay. You're right. I'm waiting. Okay. Good now,
Give me just a minute.
I have it in here.
All right.
I want our.
All right, now there's just two colors to choose from. You can see the blue? Yes?
Yeah, I'm seeing the blue. Yeah, I'm seeing the blue.
Okay.
I think that makes it a little easier. We're able to understand you now because
Sure.
we can only see two colors. There is the purple. I don't know if it's purple and the blue one.
Right. And so the
So
purple.
you mean the red square is the fire station, is it?
That's right. And the
Okay,
blue,
the
blue dot.
Listen, is that the fire station? The signal is the fire station?
Yeah, the red square he says is the fire station.
Right, red square fire station.
Okay, I'm on code.
Now you can come up with that question again.
Yeah, blue dots are fire hydrants, plugs where there's poor water. And purple is good water, lots of water, right? And this makes sense from a history lesson perspective. This blue dot area is the oldest, and it has the oldest and largest buildings, and those that are most susceptible to fire. These purple ones are built in newer areas because they are on the outskirts of town where there is better available water flow. And so my challenge, my question is, are my fire stations in the right place?
I think I can answer that. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mustafa.
Yeah, I think according to your explanation, since the areas where we can see a good flow of water and a good number of hydrants is just new, but it's very far away from where the more fire stations are. I think I don't see any problem with that, since most of the times when new areas are being developed, there are new technologies attached to the development that are pre-planned on the planning meetings. So I think, and you just explained to say most fires occur in the old setting where, I don't know if I'm right. You said this is the old setting is where it is so prone to more fires.
Correct.
So I think the locations of fire stations are not very bad, since you can see there are a lot of fire stations to old areas where it is very high for the probability of fires to erupt. And we can see one fire station close to the areas where we have a very good water flow and probably the best hydrants in the new setting. Yes. So according to me, I think the fire stations are rightly placed.
Okay. Does everybody agree?
I would like to agree with him partially, but not 100%. Reason being, the more the fire hydrants are closer to the fire station, it gives the firefighter easy access to the hydrant. But then when you see that from the old city there, what he was speaking about just now, we have well-built fire stations and hydrant not next to the fire station. But for the new city, you found out that the city is there, the fire stations are there, but then the hydrants are not much, and they are a little bit distant from the fire station. So I think, like he said, the building of new city comes with new technology. So the technology must take into consideration the issue of fire station, of a fire hydrant being very close or being accessible to the fire station.
Good. Now you're thinking with data. You're starting to fight fire with data. The way we've coped with this is that any fire in this older part of town doesn't just get resources from that central fire station. We send additional resources from the further away stations and have them bring water with them, right? And so understanding the spatial distribution of risk, and in this instance, risk is very simple. I'm just saying risk is a function of the flow of water from hydrants, right? In this case, then, adding resources to any call where I know that I have poor available water makes sense, right? I'd rather have the water coming and the manpower coming and not need them than to get there, have a big fire, and nobody's on the way already, right? So we changed how we dispatch resources to incidents based upon the available water to extinguish the fire. Now, that's a very simple model of risk, right? That's just water. But because I'm collecting data about my fire calls, there are all of my calls for service now. That confuses the data set again. That could be somebody stubbed their toe and needed a ride to the hospital and it wasn't really an emergency, or it could have been a massive fire. I don't know unless I improve the quality of the data that I'm using so that I can make that determination. So here's what I can do with GIS is I'm going to select from my fire calls those with the field for incident type, the ICC type equals 111. 111 is the code for a building fire. And I'm going to create a layer from those selected features because it's kind of hard to see here. And now I am going to make my building fires this bright red. So where you see the red triangles are where I've responded to building fires. Now, my question to you, future fire chiefs of Africa, the city government has finally approved more money to the fire department. You get to hire 4 new firemen and buy 1 new fire truck. Where are you going to put it?
Excuse me, I can't see the red triangles.
You can or cannot?
I don't know. You said you have placed some red triangles in the setting.
Yes.
I'm having difficulties finding the triangles. I can only see the red squares. Okay, now they're there.
Does that help? So I made
Now,
the fire station black squares now. The fire stations are black squares. And the
they are red squares.
Yeah, and the location of fires are the red triangles. And I still have the blue for bad fire hydrants and the purple for good ones. My question is now, you've been given money to buy another fire truck and to hire more firefighters. Where do you spend that money?
Sorry. I'm monitoring by base of phone. So please be patient with me, right? I'm a bit lost. Can you please get me back on track? I'm a bit lost, please.
Yes, who's speaking?
Is it not Emmanuel again?
No? Okay, so we'll do this. We'll do this again. I have a map on screen.
You got my question?
Yeah, Joseph, is that you?
Hello?
Joseph, can you hear me? I think his connection must be bad.
Yeah, I think he's having problems with his network. But his question was like, he is a little bit lost. He wanted you to come again with the explanation because he's following you through a phone.
Yeah. So the gist is the map that you're looking at. Hopefully you can see the map. There are black squares which indicate the location of my fire stations. There are circles that represent the flow of water from fire hydrants. The blue circles, the light blue circles, have poor water flow. The purple circles have good water flow. And then I've added red triangles that show historically where I have had building fires. And the question that I'm asking is, okay, you're the fire chief. You've been given another $1 million or whatever it is so that you can purchase a new fire truck and hire 4 more firemen. Where do you put those resources?
We've got someone in the chat saying that they think the location's on the right side.
On the right side. Let me get the chat window up here.
Chief Mike, I quite agree with him because according to the history here, it shows that where there is the bad flow of water and poor number of old hydrants is where the probability of the proportion of high fire is available. So I think if we are to buy new fire trucks and recruit more firefighters, I presume it would be wise to locate them in the old developed areas because that's where we have very poor infrastructure and a lot of history regarding fire incidences. I quite agree with the one who is in the who has put something in the chat.
Okay. Does anybody else have an opinion? Is this the right answer?
Yeah. I think I to some extent agree with Mustafa. I think what as a fire chief, what you need to do is to be focused into the old developed city where you think you can have some stations that being modernized. to meet up with future disasters or future outbreaks. I think I quite agree with the comment section and other discussion.
Okay. Well, here's what I'll tell you is the answer. And I'll kind of wrap it up from here. The answer is all of you are right, because this is, hypothetically, your jurisdiction. You know it best and should make the decisions about how you deploy resources, right? But if you're making those decisions in the absence of data, I just think this is where the highest risk is, and you haven't collected the location of your calls for at least a year and what type of calls they were. If you haven't measured the size of buildings so you know the potential fire load, if you haven't measured or determined how much water is available or how long it takes to get enough water to fight a fire to the location, then I have something to start teaching you. Because the idea here is we have to start fighting fire with data. The simple piece of that data is perhaps the most difficult, is collecting where our calls have occurred. But if you set up a standard procedure to look on a map and write down a coordinate or write down an address and start collecting these data about where you're having incidents, and then start thinking about, geez, what are the other things that contribute to fire risk? There's an informal settlement. There's no available water. The closest fire engine is 10 kilometers away, right? You can start using data to make decisions about how you respond. And you have a lot more control of the decisions and of the outcomes then, because you're driving your data, driving your decisions about deploying resources with data. And that's the overview. That is the important lesson that I wanted to share with you this morning. And then through Gary and Africa Fire Mission, if there's a group that would like to learn the skills to do this, I'm happy to work with a smaller group on a more regular basis, whether it's weekly or a week-long video workshop, and teach you how to do this with free tools, because there's a lot of free tools that are available so that you can start fighting fire with information that lets us take control of the situation a bit more. So that's my story this morning, Mike. I will entertain any questions.
Excellent. Great topic, and really gives us a lot of things to think about. Really appreciate that offer of being willing to dive a little bit deeper into this. And I guess I would mention too, one of the first ways you could start with this too is with the paper maps and the push pins to start collecting some data before you get into these other resources as a quick, readily available to start tracking some of that data. So really some interesting ideas and good ways to think about how we're doing things using data. Typically, the fire service is a little bit behind on that. Sometimes we do things by tradition instead of using the science and data. So,
in fact, what we found, and we started working with FDNY, I teach for the fire department in New York, the rescue companies, I teach search and rescue. And we realized during Hurricane Sandy for them. They were back in the Stone Age. Their communication system didn't work. They had to use paper maps. And what you see on screen now is the paper map system that we put together for them to navigate with, to go to calls in New York. And this is a live product now that they update and maintain on a daily basis. And what's interesting with this is they can print it as a paper map book, but it also exists in digital form that allows them to turn some of these different layers of data on and off. And so they can actually have a GPS plugged into their phone or use the GPS on their phone. This is a PDF document, and they can walk and ride around this, or they can have a printed copy, a paper copy that they can use to get around with. And so you're absolutely right. But it starts with taking and finding the data. And I can guarantee you I'll show a few examples. Where are some of our participants from right now in the world?
We have folks currently that I've seen from Malawi, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe.
Well, I've been to Livingston, Zambia. Do you think that there's good data for Livingstone? And the answer is yes. Right? This is yes and no. So the informal settlement that I know is here is not appearing on the map. Right? Or we could look at Nairobi. The data for Nairobi is outrageously good. Look, we have the footprint of every building and even some building type data like churches and markets, the major roads, where the schools are. So data is available for you to get started with this. It's, would you like to start making some of your decisions, start fighting fire with data? And we can turn this into a paper map book. And it would even be, you could give this paper map book to your dispatcher. And what's common here now is our dispatcher says, Boulder County Volunteer Fire, you have a structure fire at 100 Main Street, map page 6, square 2311. Everybody's on the same page and knows where we're going. It's the power of location and the power of data that can help you save lives.
Yeah, I think I should interrupt you a bit.
Go ahead, Mustafa.
All right. I just wanted to come up with a comment on the topic. I think this is very helpful. To answer your question, like here in Malawi, in Lilongwe, where we are fighting fire using data, I think we haven't been there yet. Much as we do reporting every month on how many fires we have fought regarding in reference to like building fires, car fires, and bush fires, but we haven't reached this extent of like using GPS to come up with exact spotted areas located where we will be able to say, last week we were at this place, and this week we are at this place, like that. We haven't reached that. But because the most of the fire brigades in Malawi are located and they are owned by the local councils. We have planning departments in our city councils who have the actual GPS of our own, the whole cities that we belong to. So it would be very easier for us to go and ask them to have a printed copy of the GPS on paper. Then we can put it, let's say, for example, on a notice board, whereby we'll be able to say, with reference to where we are, we place a pin here indicating that this is where the recent fire was. So this has been very, very helpful to us because it has opened up our eyes on how we can start slowly fighting fires with data. On the other hand, we in our fire stations, we do not actually have computers whereby we would say we'll be using soft copies or softwares to say we're keeping data in through computers or something. But since your next explanation was you can even have it on a hard copy, I think that would be very helpful. And it will make it easier for us to start making our reports very comprehensive every month. Thank you. I think it has been a very helpful topic, and we need to learn more, just like you've said. I hope Chief Mike will consider giving you more room where we would be able to learn more about these new technologies on how we can keep data and fight fires using data. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think I got a late comment. I'm Amanda from Liberia. And to just say the truth to you, I think the topic is good. The topic is very important. But for us here in Liberia, we are far away lacking behind when it comes to the issue of fire prevention. We don't do the GPS thing. We don't do the data store. At our fire stations, we don't have the necessary sophistication there to do the issue of GPS and that of data. So we do what we call the manual start of fighting fire, where product will call to our laying form, and we use that same form to tweet or to get to the actual location. So you find out that most of our response times are almost late because the quarters are not too sophisticated when it comes to giving on the actual direction or description of the main site where the fire is. So it's actually a problem for us. And so what we do, we normally do data collection through the manual store, or we combine it. Yesterday, like you say, last week we were in Douala, the following week we were in New Houston, and at the end of the month, we just compile them and you guys are far way ahead of us. You guys are far way ahead of us. I'm hoping and praying that our fire department will read that far, because most of our fire department here is totally incorporated by the government. We don't have our sister brigade are not too sophisticated. We have the National Port Authority, we have the International Port, the RIA. They are there too, but then they are only restricted to the port. They are not moving out of the port, except wherein our capacity are being overwhelmed. Because we found out that they themselves will have only one fire engine at the port. So leaving the port is a serious problem for them. So we face difficulties when it comes to the issue of getting data. We don't have the GPS system. We don't have the necessary sophistication of our fire stations to get together. So we use the manual start to get to our fire things. So you find out that, like I said, it gave us tougher time to reach to our fire to our destination, because you have to be calling on the phone back and forth. When the person is in emergency situation, you're calling them, they might not just be able to give the exact location because of fear. Oh, fire, fire, fire. People running around. They say, oh, it fires. At times you find out that a gas station is on fire. So a caller will call you and say the horse is on fire, the horse is on fire. But when you have access to the GPS, it will tell you exactly where the fire is and what kind of structure or what kind of object is on fire. So I'd like to say thank you for the topic today on the discussion. It's somehow encouraging, and I'm hoping and praying that Liberia will get to that fire one of these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I don't want to keep this conversation going here, but I'm going to wrap up sort of the formal portion of our training. So stick around. We're going to take some more questions. Let me just formally thank Talbot for coming. And I think what we'll do is we'll talk offline about getting a blog post up on our website to point you to some of these resources that you can use to begin utilizing some of this technology that he's been talking about. and to thank all of you for joining us, taking the time out of your schedules, using your money to purchase your bundles. We've got plenty of extra seats here in our trainings, so be sure to share with all of your fellow firefighters and anybody else you think that might be interested in joining you. That's all we're going to do for the formal portion, but please stick around, carry on with more questions.